Welcome back. Last week, I introduced you to this repair job of Louis XVI mantle, fireplace mantle. And this is obviously this is the broken leg that I talked about in the last video. And so this is the continuation. And so this is the lower half of the broken piece. This is the bottom, the base. And so what I've started doing is I've started preparing for inserting a piece of stone as a key that will lock these two pieces in. I decided to go with stone rather than a steel or a brass or a bronze pin, which would be something that would be typically used. I wanted to go back to a more traditional approach. And it's in my opinion that, especially when you deal with fireplaces, because of the element of heat, that when you introduce into stone metallic objects, the expansion and contraction, the thermal coefficient between the two materials is slightly different. And I've seen in a lot of cases where repair work that had reinforcement in them, the joints often open up. And so I figured stone is going to be more compatible. And so I used a similar type of stone. This is a North American oolitic limestone, which is what this is. An oolitic limestone is a particular type of limestone that is found around the world, but it's made up of fossilized what are called oolites, and so it's designates a type of limestone in particular. And Indiana limestone is a type of oolitic limestone that's common in North America. And typically oolitic limestones are found in warmer, more tropical environments. So in North America, most of the oolitic limestone tends to be in either the Indiana deposit or the Texas deposit. So I chose a piece of Indiana. This is a fairly dense, strong Indiana, so I think that it'll work well despite its thin size to offer the right kind of key. And the concept is that it'll be inserted into a notch, and I'll set that into plaster. And then once that's set up, I'll mark out on the adjacent side of the break, and I'll key that in, and I'll set it in. So it ends up being like a mortise and tenon type of a joint. And that will provide a very good, strong bond. Because it's set in plaster, it's very compatible with the limestone. Antiques are always installed using plaster. You never use in sand or plaster, since they are both soft, flexible, and completely reversible, unlike modern day Portland cements or epoxies, which are not. The one exception that I would say for interior finishes is using a polyester resin, which both bonds extremely well, but is also soft and flexible, maintains its flexibility, and is also reversible. So in the last video, I talked about how I was going to be showing you and introducing to you patching plaster mixes. So what I've gone ahead and done just as a test sample, and it takes a little bit of trial and error, so you'll want to do samples. And I'll explain to you in more detail about what it is that I'm talking about. But this is still wet, so it's gone off. It's set up. That's the nice thing about plaster; it goes off very quickly, and it goes off quite hard. So I've done this as a test. I'll see how it looks when it dries. I'm pretty sure that it's a little bit off in color. I think it needs a little bit more of a yellow tint to it. But again, it's somewhat of a distortion because, of course, I still have some of the staining here, which I've already started cleaning off here. This side was covered in a lot of blotches of dark gray Portland cement, and had previously been mechanically cleaned. So there was really no original finish on this side of the leg. So what I've just done is I've just taken a rub stone and just, lightly gone over it to rub off the dirt and any surface contamination without going in too much. And then you can decide at what point do you stop. If you want some of this natural staining or dirt to be left on for character reason, then you can control. And what I'm doing is I'm just using this is just a snapped um, like a grinding wheel. So it would have been, I guess, off of most likely a bench grinder. So this would be just like a standard, I don't know what it would be, like aluminum oxide or silicon oxide grinding stone. And they work quite well as a rub stone. So that's, as you can see, just you get a lot of control when you use a rub stone. So that's what I've been doing. And then afterwards, and then I just sponge it down with some water and a sponge. And then if there's any contaminations in the stone or any salts or whatever, then it'll bleed them out to the surface and give it a nice warmth. And you get a lot of control when you use that kind of a tactic. So you're not going too extreme, because you always want to have a sensitive approach when it comes to an antique. You don't want it to be too fresh, too new. Otherwise, it might as well be a new fireplace. And that's always the people can be a little bit overzealous when it comes to cleaning stone, wanting it to look like new, without remembering the fact that this stone, if this quarry is still in operation, the stone that's in the quarry is the same age as this stone here, even though this stone was quarried, some 300 years ago. And the only thing that makes this an old piece is the original tool marks and the original staining. That's the only thing that makes this an antique. Once all that is removed, if you remove all this tooling, if I was to cut this and clean this completely clean, it would be just like a brand new block straight out of the quarry. There'd be no indication of it as being an antique at all. And that's the interesting nature of stone. And I've explained this to people before, and they kind of was in a bit of an epiphany, because it allowed them to really think about stone in a different context. It's not like an organic material where no matter what, it's always an old piece. Stone is old by nature. It was created, hundreds of millions of years ago. And the only thing that makes it old by our standards is this, whatever the surface is exposed to. When you peel too much of that off, you remove a lot of that history. Usually cleaning is only to allow the stone to look its best and behave its best. So having too much contamination on the surface of stone can create a lot of problems that can lead to premature spalling and various other problems. And that's really the primary reason why anybody ever cleans stone, is to allow it to breathe properly. Because limestone in particular, and to a certain extent sandstone, really needs to breathe in order for whatever it takes in to be expelled. When you trap that within the stone, you can cause a lot of pressures within the stone, causing surface spalling, which is the main purpose for cleaning stone. So as that sample is setting up and drying, until I'll know whether or not it's a good color, which I think it's close, but it does need some tweaking, I believe. So I'll find out when it dries. You never really know, and that's why it's best to do some samples. And that's why I chose to do a sample at the back of this, at the back of the fireplace. So I just chose to do a sample here at the back of the leg, and I'll just discuss about the nature of the mix. So what I've done is I've just used I picked up some plaster of Paris, and this is just like a craft plaster of Paris that I picked up at a dollar store, and it's very good quality. And what's nice about it is that it's not a big volume. It's just a small 1 kilogram bag here. And so I used this was something that I kind of came up with today, and I'll see how it works. And again, this is always just something that I'm always always thinking about and exploring. What I used was I used the chippings from setting in the key in the top of the leg, and I took those and I crushed those, and I used roughly about a 50% 50-50 ratio of the limestone chippings crushed down into a granule, like an aggregate, and I added that to the plaster. So it's 50% plaster, 50% of the limestone dust, and then I added some acrylic pigments. And again, these are just cheap, acrylic pigments, acrylic paint I got at the dollar store. So and I'm mixing it. What I do is I just pre-add the pigment. So then you have to, the pigments can be strong, so it's you have to kind of. So while the that sample is drying, and it's probably going to take. Well, I think I'll probably leave it for the weekend because today is Saturday, so I'm going to leave it for till Monday, and we'll see where it's at. By that time, it should be dry. But in the meantime, I'm going to continue to deepen this chase. You can see that it's getting close now, and I've got it a little more than an inch. It's almost halfway, so it's about so far I've got about 1.5 inches in. I'm going to put this in just a little bit deeper, and then that will be deep enough. And then the next stage will be doing the other side of the break. And I just wanted to point out that one of the things that I've done to prepare this joint, the broken joint, was to take a punch. If you've watched my videos on chisels, then you'll be familiar with this tool. This is referred to as a punch or a point, and I've punched off the crown in the center of the break. The reason why I do that is when you have an uneven break, you bring the two pieces together, the likelihood of them meeting up with flush joints all the way around, with a flush face all the way around, is very, very slim. It has to do with the way that the stone separates. And so you go in and you take off the crown, the high points, the bulbous parts of the inner part, staying away from the perimeter, the margins of the stone. You just take it out, take the crown off from the center, And if you do that to both pieces, then it'll allow you space for a setting compound in the middle, whether you use plaster or you're using a polyester resin or whatnot. The idea being that it allows room for the bonding agent. I'll cover this again. This won't be the last time I'll talk about this concept, because it's an important detail that if you overlook, it's almost virtually impossible to bring a piece together and put something like mortar or lime or plaster or something between the two pieces without actually extending the length of the piece. And before I set this, what I'm also going to do is I'm going to take the punch and I'm going to punch the surface of this piece of Indiana so that it has traction, so that when I flood this tight joint, as you can see it's quite tight, I'm going to flood that with a liquid plaster, and I'll wet down the inside of the stone first. So I'll soak the stone, and then I'll pour in plaster. But you need some kind of traction, because this is smooth still, and so the traction between the punched surface and the rough French limestone should offer very good bond. And once it sets up hard, it's going to be a very strong connection. So when I talk about punching down surfaces, this is what I'm referring to. It occurred to me that you have to bear with me. Sometimes when you've been doing something long enough, you use terms so freely, you just assume that people will understand what you're talking about. But this is what is referred to as punching on the surface in stone cutting, stone masonry. So you just come down on it. Actually, you can control the angle, so you can use several different techniques. You can come down on a vertical approach. It's like stunning the surface. Or you can come in from an angle. And you've probably seen this in old historic buildings, the punch marks, and they'll use that for taking the crowns off of. It's usually in the backs of stones or in head joints. In fact, you'll see that over on the other side here. If I just show you this. So this would be a combination of, around the edges, you see there's a rough draft, and that's been done with a draft chisel, which is like this chisel here, usually about a 1/2 inch chisel. And that would have been done with a chisel very similar to this one, which is mallet headed. And in the center, you'd have it punched down, and they would have used something very similar to this. And there are several different types of punches, but this is the one that I'm most familiar with. But there's also a square punch as well, which is often used in. I think it was preferred for different types of stone in different types of regions. But they do this essentially the same purpose of removing the center of the waste off of a bed of stone. But that's yeah. So that's what I was talking about when I was describing the idea of taking the crown off the center. You stay away from the margin. You just go in lightly. You don't go in too aggressively. This is a similar technique that you use for preparing or roughing up head joints on stones when you want good bondage with mortar. And you'll see that this is a technique that's been used for thousands of years. You'll see that in ancient buildings, and that's how you get really good traction, the head joints on mortar. The mortar locks in with the roughness that you've created with these punch marks. So that's a fun little detail that when if you go on vacation someplace, or if you live in a place that has a lot of stone buildings, you can watch out for those kinds of details. Sometimes these things are details that people have been looking at for years and never really either thought about it or asked why they do that until it's pointed out. And then all of a sudden it changes the way that you look at things. You understand why things were done and how they were done, which is fun. You know, it's the more you know, right? This is a universal language, stone cutting. They have different terminologies and different tools, but the essential techniques are universal around the world. So I'll do this first, and then I'll mark out for the key stone that I'm going to cut into this. I'll have to measure it out where exactly it goes, and then I'll carve an opposite to the lower section. So if you're enjoying this kind of content and you want to see more of my content, then please subscribe, and don't forget to hit the notification bell. It helps out with the algorithm, and it's completely free, so I'd really appreciate it. And I hope that I can offer you a lot more, both entertainment and information. So I think I'm going to leave the video off at this point. I think that I've covered everything that I wanted to. I didn't show you actually putting it together. It's been a bit of a haphazard last few weeks for me, so it's the schedule's a little off, but you bear with me. We'll see great things come in the future. But in the meantime, I'm going to continue to put this together, and then I'll see you next time. All right, thanks for watching. Bye.